is Evan Blount, and I play Phalanx, the DK tank, or Phalanx, however you prefer to say that. The spelling of it is kind of what makes me say it's Phalanx, because with the PH it would be the other way. But you get it's a pun on tanking in the first place. That's why I chose it, because Death Knights don't use shields, so shield formation in Greek, that was why I chose that name. Been playing since Burning Crusade. I picked it up at the behest of some friends. I had another guy that roomed with me that played Classic WoW, but I wasn't really into MMOs at the time. I dabbled in City of Heroes, and that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth because that game was just like so broken in some ways. And I did a bit of Guild Wars, but like never wanted to pay a subscription after City of Heroes. So then met up with some friends later on in college that wanted to play at Burning Crusade. So they said, okay, let's go do it. Let's pre-order and we'll all go play at Burning Crusade. So I did. For all of Burning Crusade, the most content I ever did was like small raids with Kara and briefly touched all the other stuff as it right as it was nerfed before Kata or before Wrath, I mean. And I was playing a hunter back then, really didn't know what I was doing, but I think everybody starts off that way where you have kind of this period where you didn't know what the hell was going on, and then you decide to go either hardcore into PvP or hardcore into raiding, or maybe both. But started raiding really hard at Wrath when they released Death Knights. I kind of got this vibe from all the tanks I had ever met that they were all kind of pricks and entitled assholes. So I wanted to roll the new tank class and be the tank who could do everything those guys could do better and be a nicer person about it. Since last December, I think, is when I was picked up for CD. So it's at about 10 months now. No, sorry, 9 months. No. We're the first active mitigators. So specifically with DK tanks, like you had to, especially when they added the whole blood shield mechanic, it was a bit different back in Wrath before that whole thing. You just kind of got used to, reacting to damage. If you saw a spike, you death strike, and that kind of was the same. The blood shield mechanic changed a lot in that you started wanting to care about, say, what the size of the shield was going to be. So that was pretty much the secret of that. Is like once I knew that was coming along, and I knew that there would be add-ons that support tracking that blood shield tracker. Um, that actually brought me even further on top of my game because that add-on just makes all the difference in the world. And just kind of having a general feel of kind of slowing down when you're a DK tank a little bit. So like it's like, okay, I don't need to blow everything all at once. I can just kind of see how the damage is taking, see how the healers react to it, and then you can react. And that's kind of the bonus of being a Death Knight in the first place, which is where we're at now with all the other tanks. So now they're all learning this process of how to react to the situation and become their own healers, become more in charge of their own health. And it's kind of the way I like playing any and all games in that matter, is that it's not so much dependent on the rest of the group, because there's been so many times where I wish I could clone myself 25 times just to get through a raid night. And you can't do that. So at least you can take some modicum of control and take control of your own health. So my UI originally was very basic. I used the whole just basic UI with two the health, the enemy frame and your frame up in the upper left. That's a very bad thing to do as a tank. You don't want them up there. So if you're looking to become a new tank, move those suckers down into your viewpoint. I would suggest that for anybody. So with that in mind, you started using Xpearl for a while, and it's always solid. It always works. The guy always updates it, but it just looks like hell. So I moved on to LUI, not LVUI. I did try that in beta, not really my thing, but LUI. And I kind of base it around seeing as many debuffs as I can and buffs on targets. So, like on my boss frame to the right, I can like see every debuff that's on him that is important to me, the timers that are on those, and buffs that they get themselves, so that you can better anticipate what the boss is going to do based on the buffs that he has and that sort of thing. Also, cast bars, big and central in the middle, are very important. As far as other things I recommend is just kind of spreading that idea of being able to see debuffs across the entire raid. So like tidy plates with debuff trackers is essential for a tank, especially since it tracks, like with tidy plates, you basically don't need omen anymore. As long as it is coloring correctly, you know what's angry at you and what's not, what's being tanked by another tank, what's being tanked by a DPS, and if you need to taunt him. So that's pretty much all the UI. The other thing I could talk about is the kind of downfall of Power Wars. That's kind of recent. We'll see if what happens there. But I used to be a big Power Wars fan, so like just Power Wars everywhere. Things that would like notify you of like your blood shield, which is really essential. Make one for that. Or debuffs that are important to the fight, such as fading light, all that stuff. Just had 2 years of Power Wars that all went down the tube when the guy decided to update and not import anything or make even a global system for sharing your Power Wars. So moved on to Weak Wars. It's pretty good, and that's all the UI stuff I really add to my game. It's hard for me not to be nostalgic about Ulduar. I'm sure everybody hears about Ulduar, but that's the first time that I really got my break as a tank. So like when Wrath first started, there was huge animosity towards Death Knights. Like I'm not sure how many people remember that, but like if you went into a raid as Death Knight, they're like, you can't tank. They would all just yell at you to stop tanking. And I think that was actually just a large part of the tanking community being very angry that there was something new. Like that had never happened to them before. So by the time Ulduar came around, that was the first time that there was like a major break, and DKs were actually really strong in that instance. So that's when I was like first picked up by like a server first pushing guild and stuff like that. So um, I actually moved quite a few guilds during the time of Ulduar, but it's just an outstanding instance as far as like design, pure size of it, and variety of the fights. And it's something that you should really try and emulate each time that you're designing a raid instance in general. Least fun thing I've had to do in game. There's been a couple. I've actually got video footage of a couple of them. The worst one, to which I put the song Benny Hill theme to, was kiting ads around in the Conclave of Windfight. So we had, this was in 25 man. You literally could not kill the flowers in Heroic 25. They would just rape you. So what we had to do was I would spec him Frost with Chillblains and literally run circles endlessly around the platform for just days while the rest of the raid figured out how to do the fight. And I literally like ran around that circle, I think probably close to like 1,000 times with a bunch of little flowers chasing me, exploding poison. Second, second most disliked thing was probably these two kind of are similar. These all have to do with ad tanking. I guess I hate ad tanking. Is tanking the ads on Nefarian, where it's just horrible on a Death Knight. First of all, you have no shield, so like you're literally dealing with blood shields that at the time would miss. You wouldn't always get them, so you just get super spiky and just kiting those things around and trying to figure out the mechanic of Shadow Flame as Nefarian would breathe it, because it took DBM literally forever to figure out how that timer worked. And that was one of the only ways you could track it, besides like turning your camera and looking at his face to see a shadow flame flying out of his mouth, which was impossible because there's this huge wall that would press your camera against it. Just a horrible fight. Um, Kind of fun now looking back at it, but back in the day it was not fun at the time. And then the other one would have to be tanking Lich King's ads. So I was on the fight where I would basically drop Death and Decay over the main tank, pull all the ghouls off of him, get the Shambling Horse over to me with Death Grips, and that was just a ton of work, especially since I had to track the debuff on each individual mob to try and get it to stack up to probably around 25 or 30 by the time that thing would drop on 25 heroic. Usually it involves some sort of glitch with the game. Like there's actually quite a few right now, like multiple stacking stags on top of each other. That one's a really good one. Um, there's a whole zombie thing when we were coming out of Burning Crusade into Wrath was hilarious. As much as people hated that, everybody killing each other's auctioneers and poisoning an entire town with zombies was pretty funny. I mean, it was just troll central, but you had to laugh at it because it was just not going to stop until it dropped. Um, then yeah, the other funniest thing would have to be literally taking those ads on Conclave of Wind. That's why I created a video of it in the first place, because it was just the most ridiculous job I've ever had to do. I laughed the whole time I did it. Um, Gosh, that would have to be my first server first. And what's sad is I can't even remember what fight it was. Pretty sure it was Algalon though. That was like the first time I'd ever seen the server first spam across my screen, and that was like such an intense moment. Um, Especially since like we had like the whole server come out, and like we're all in Dalaran, like the whole server's there. They're all crowding around the fountain. We like change the colors of Dalaran, and it's like you're getting whispered by like 50 to 60 people, just like all telling you congrats, and it's like it's a hell of an experience to get server first. Plus the sheer rush of doing it. I mean, the rush of killing a boss the first time in raiding, I've often like said is like better than some orgasms during sex. Like you just can't beat it. Like just that rush that you get. Um, Maybe skydiving would come close. I don't know. Should try it. Sure. I'm originally from Colorado. Still live in Colorado, although I might move on eventually. But was born and raised in Manitou Springs, a little tiny town that's off the beaten path from Colorado Springs, which is kind of infamous for being religious zealots. But they're really not. They're nice people too. It's just those religious zealots are very loud people. And moved up to Denver to go to school here, and currently live here. I've been here all 30 years. In real life right now, I currently play WoW professionally. No, I pretty much just play WoW because I'm in between jobs and in between careers. So I worked at my university's library for about 5 years doing computer stuff with them, kind of doing techie stuff like breaking apart computers, putting them together. They moved on into PHP programming, databases, and websites. Then eventually got a contract job that was kind of their way of laying me off, and did that for 2 years, and then that ended. So now I'm just kind of like searching as to what I want to do, whether it be in programming, maybe it's getting a new career, maybe it's going back to grad school. Kind of enjoying being, uh, for the first time in my life, kind of having a year off. We'll call this my European vacation year, and hopefully will not hurt me in the resume when they interview me in the future. All right, so I run on a 30-inch screen. It's 2560 by 1600, so it's pretty large. Actually got that through Dell for free when they messed up an order on my computer 5 years ago. They kept delaying the order, and eventually it came to me, and they'd given me $2,000 off on a $5,000 machine. And then this screen showed up, which was like an additional $3,000, but it wasn't on the product shipping list at all. Just the screen showed up. So I was like, okay, not ever telling them about that. Still using that baby to this day. The computer's now defunct, but the screen is still awesome. I hope it never breaks. As far as my rig goes, it's custom made from Magic Micro. It sports a i7 processor, 330 megahertz, and or gigahertz, I should say. 12 gigs of RAM, and two graphics cards, both of them NVIDIA 570 GTXs in SLI. I realize that doesn't help WoW much at all, but I do like to play other games a lot. So that's why I bought this crazy rig, was mostly just to play Crisis and like The Witcher 2 and all those crazy graphic games. And to a degree, StarCraft and Diablo do take their fair share of my processor, so it heats up all right. That's pretty much my setup. Oh yeah, and I use a Cataclysm mouse too, just the biggest mouse ever. If you haven't noticed, there's a piano beside me, and there's also a saxophone to my left. Little does everybody know that I actually spent like a good portion of my life trying to be a musician. So I spent was playing actually professionally at the end of high school down in Colorado Springs, like with jazz clubs and stuff like that. So I would like walk in, sit in, and play jazz. And I've been playing piano since I was 4, and did music school for 3 years, and then decided that it was kind of more of a game of politics than it was really a game of like skill and desire. So I just kind of eventually burned out on it and decided to go into computers instead. So that's one hobby. The other hobby is I am a huge video game enthusiast. Like, if I were to show you my video game library, you would decide that I really don't have much of a life and probably should do something else. Just endless amounts of games. If you name a game, I've probably played it, especially older ones. And I try and keep up to date with newer ones, although I do have quite the backlog of like games that are kind of piling up. Um, I think a large part of that becomes from every video game developer tries to pack more and more content into the game, or else the fans cry, "Oh, there's not enough content in this game." But what the fans don't realize is that I think it's something like 30% of games. I'll have to look this figure up again, but it's like 30% of games are actually go finished. The rest, nobody ever beats. And a large part of that is because games have too much content in these days sometimes. I mean, you can have some games that have a load of content, aka WoW, or say like Zelda or Final Fantasy, but not every game needs to be that way. So like action games like let's say Grand Theft Auto, for instance, or something. Sometimes those games you kind of get everything they need to say within the 200 missions or so, and then they go on for another 5 to 6,000 after that missions, and you're just kind of like, I was kind of done with this game back then. So I feel that's kind of why there's a backlog of my games adding up. But I do kind of pick through them eventually, especially while I'm jobless. It's a good time to play a lot of games. Now, do look for, I will be trying to film at least our kills in completely different, using fraps and video editing and putting snazzy music suggested by the raid team onto them. And usually what I try and do is like get as many people filming at once so I can like edit the videos together. Multiple views make for better videos anyway, especially since you can like catch highlights of people. So you can watch for those on YouTube under Bioforge55. That's BIOFORGE 55. That's there. And you can also watch, if I do stream, I will stream on probably Justin TV slash Bioforge55 there. And I might stream on Twitch, although I haven't set that up. And if I do, it'll be twitch.tv slash Bioforge55. It's kind of the same. I always use that moniker there.